Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, Dave and I will be joined by Bills beat reporter Alex Brasky of the Batavia Daily. We'll react as he gives us the inside scoop on everything that has gone down at Buffalo Bills training camp thus far. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour, brought to you by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. In a couple of minutes here, we will be joined by Alex Brasky of the Batavia Daily. He's currently, I think he was hanging out with Sal Capaccio, Matthew Move at Bar Bill. So he's getting back to the office. He's generous enough to give us his time, and he's running just a little bit late this evening, but he will be joining us any minute now to give us his inside scoop from training camp. Before we are joined by Alex, we are also proud to announce as a podcast that we have re-upped our sponsorship deal for the 2024-2025 season with Picasso's Pizza. So you can head on over to picassospizza.net at any time, whether you are in Buffalo, they got 4 great Buffalo locations, or even if you're an out-of-towner like us, picassospizza.net is where it's at to get yourself some good Buffalo-style pizza with that cup and char pepperoni. Perfect for watching the Air Raid Hour, for listening to all these training camp podcasts that people are probably listening to right now, because Bills Mafia is excited. Real football is back.
Yeah, and I apologize to the viewers tonight if I sound a little under the weather. I'm battling the Rona right now, but it's my Jordan flu game tonight, I guess you could say. The show must go on, and look, if these guys are out there, battling their own things, I'm going to battle through tonight as well. But you're right. I mean, last Monday we were on the show, and we were prepping for this, and we were kind of like anxious to see how things would kick off get started, right? With the offense be behind. That's not been the case so far from what we've been hearing over the first 4 to 5 days. And there is a lot of buzz right now around this Bills team. And I think part of that is there's always buzz, right, in the early stages of training camp. But I think what makes this year a little bit different is that all the new faces, right? And it's not just the players, it's new faces on the coaching staff as well. We talked about 2 new coordinators, young, energetic. You've got young, youthful faces now on the personnel side as well, through the draft, free agency, what have you. And so the buzz is like a combination of, yes, this time of year is always exciting, but also to see kind of this new version of the Bills team finally take the field and show something on the field.
You mentioned sort of that youthful injection at coordinator. We have Joe Brady on the offensive side, and it's been really fun watching sort of Joe Brady and Josh Allen work together. It seems like Joe Brady is really taking what Josh Allen has to say into account, giving him ownership of the offense. Josh Allen is taking on even more of a leadership role. Article by Tim Graham came out, said he's really emphasizing becoming more of a leader, maybe separating himself, trying to be less buddy-buddy with people and take more of an ownership of the leadership position. Josh Allen, that is. So a lot of really interesting pieces on the offense. I think the most interesting is all of that, right? Josh Allen looking comfortable and confident is all of this motion that we're seeing. Because, Dave, I feel like it's been 3 years, and for 3 years now, we've been talking about this offense utilizing pre-snap motion, moving guys pre-snap. We're seeing Curtis Samuel being weaponized through the first couple of days of training camp.
Yeah, and also if you watched Eric and Anthony's post-day 4 camp video, they were talking about this motion as well, and talking a lot about how there were a lot of simple motions, right? It was a lot of times it was just the running back doing some basic motion and some things to maybe still create that motion in the offense, but simplify things a bit so the guys can maybe play a bit faster. There are new faces, obviously, at receiver. So you have a guy like James Cook, who's been in the system. You have Ty Johnson. Obviously, you have the rookie Ray Davis, but he's been impressing. But putting that on the running backs maybe to start out with, not a bad idea. Simplify things for a lot of the new faces in the receiver room and still get that motion that you wanted to see in this offense. So I think it's a smart move by Joe Brady to approach it that way. And as we probably ramp up into the second, third, weeks of camp, we'll probably see some more, maybe some more exotic motions coming out of this offense.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we are joined this evening by Alex Brasky, maybe one of the busiest members of the Buffalo Bills beat right now. I know I see you're doing guest appearances, you're bringing guest galores on your show, you are writing articles, you are doing podcasts. Alex has been everywhere covering Buffalo Bills training camp. You can find his work at thedailynewsonline.com, his podcast right here, right now. It will be linked into our show notes at the end of the show. And you can follow him on X at Alex Brasky. Alex, welcome into the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Sorry I was a little bit late. Stopped out at Barbell East out in Rochester. Matt Beauvais and Sal Capaccio having a live podcast. Got together with a couple other media members, had some good chats and discussing some Bills, as I'm sure we're set to do here. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you hear a hum in the background?
No, you're good.
Okay. You're
good.
All right.
Sounds good. The AC unit in the office here kicked on just as I came on. Wanted to make sure I sounded okay for you guys.
No, it's all good. And, we're going to jump right into it this evening because you're lucky enough to be on the ground, boots on the ground, get to see everything. We're sort of watching from afar here. So we got a ton of questions lined up for you this evening. And we want to start with position battles. And we're going to sort of work some injuries into this as well, because a couple of these position battles are now going to be affected by injuries that have happened over the past couple of days. And we're going to start with the running back position. The big news today, Ty Johnson went down, still waiting on the details, but it appeared to maybe be a relatively significant knee injury. He was, wincing. He did not look comfortable. He did not return to practice. But up until then, how had the number 2 running back job between James Cook been looking between Ty Johnson and rookie Ray Davis?
Yeah, I've been impressed with Ray Davis thus far during training camp, his pass catching ability, and a nice run today. Daquan Jones penetrating into the backfield, and Davis showing great patience and elusiveness in the backfield, able to escape what looked like he was going to be under tackle and turn it into some pretty good yardage. I think it's kind of been back and forth between Johnson and Davis. Unfortunately, Johnson just hasn't been able to stay healthy throughout this offseason. You saw him miss some time during those OTAs along with Ray Davis, and now once again missing time during training camp. Availability is the best ability, and we know that Ty Johnson, that's been a problem for him throughout his career. Big opportunity for Ray Davis now, and another name to keep an eye on, Darrington Evans. He had a big day today, a 70-yard touchdown run up the middle, and he's had a number of big runs throughout training camp, and he's been around in this system for a couple of years. So I think maybe certain people looking for the Bills to maybe add a running back if Ty Johnson's going to be out for an extended period. But I think what I've seen from Darrington Evans throughout training camp inspires me to believe that he can fill in behind Davis as a number 3 running back.
Has Evans gotten any work as a kick returner? Because I know last preseason he got work as a kick returner, but the new rules and everything, Matthew Smiley sort of made it sound like maybe it's more of a punt returner's game even on kick returns this year.
Yeah, minimally during practice, he has been back there returning kicks. It's primarily been Andy Isabella, Daquan Hardy, and KJ Hamler doing the return duties, both kick returning and punt returning. I think that's who it's going to come down to, one of those 3. Maybe Hamler, leader in the clubhouse right now, just due to that athletic skill set. But then again, it comes down to how many players they're going to keep at the wide receiver position. If they keep 5, I don't think there's any chance Hamler makes it. If they keep 6 and out of the realm, maybe 7, then Hamler has a much better chance. But yeah, I think Evans' return ability, that's something else that plays into maybe his possibility of making the roster. With the kickoff rule changes, you never know what kind of dynamic you want in a returner going into this season. That's going to kind of play out game by game. So perhaps they would like a more bruising runner like Evans back there as opposed to a Hamler. I guess we'll find out as the weeks go on.
Yeah, and Alex, that kinda you mentioned the fact that, it would be maybe unlikely that the Bills keep 7 wide receivers as we now kinda transition into talking about the wide receiver room, which is a big topic on a lot of people's minds right now. The top 4 receivers in this room appear to be locked up. We got Samuel, who's been making plays, Khalil Shakir, people are raving about him. Coleman has obviously stolen the show, and Matt Collins has stolen the show in multiple ways, but now it seems like maybe this number 5 and maybe even number 6 jobs are now up for competition, and we know technically the Bills only kept 5 receivers on the roster last year. I would be a little bit surprised if they only kept 5 this year.
Mhm.
The battle for the number 5 job, the battle for the number 6 job. I think going into camp, we assumed MVS would maybe have an inside track to a roster spot, but maybe that's not the case right now. So who are making a push? I know we talked a lot about Tyrell Shavers in our pre-camp projections, and it sounds like he's making some noise as well. So what is that situation looking right now in that sort of battle for the number 5 and number 6 wide receiver spot?
Yeah, I said it to my co-host on Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo Football Talk, AJ Sobolski. I believe it was today or yesterday. I don't think I've written down Marquez Valdez-Scantling in my notebook once throughout training camp, and he's just been a complete no-show throughout camp. And I know that they signed him for a decent chunk of change, but with Tyrell Shavers, as you mentioned, coming on throughout the offseason training program and now mixing in with the ones at training camp, he's certainly making a push for that 5-6 wide receiver spot. With Chase Claypool out due to injury, that opportunity is opened up for Shavers. Another player to watch, Brian Thompson, just continues to make play after play. I'm not so sure he has a great chance to make the roster. This is kind of his first year bursting onto the scene, whereas Shavers has done it for a couple of years now. So I'd probably give the edge to Shavers in that circumstance. But Brian Thompson has been equally impressive catching the football, big play after big play. So those two players under the radar, not much of a chance entering the offseason. I think have made a name for themselves throughout the offseason training program and training camp.
You mentioned MVS being invisible. I'm looking at some of the names that I've been combing over all the various different, camp reports from all the various different beat reporters. The top 4, MVS, Chase Claypool, Tyrell Shavers, KJ Hamler. Those are all the guys that have sort of been noted as having taken snaps with Josh Allen. Have any other receivers during team work outside of those 8 guys taken snaps with Josh Allen?
Run the 8 by me again.
Samuel, Shakir, Coleman, Hollins, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Chase Claypool, Tyrell Shavers, and KJ Hamler.
I believe that is it. I know that we saw Isabella out there during the offseason training program. I'm not positive if we've seen him with the first team out there during training camp. But yeah, I believe that's a safe bet to say that those 8 are really the 8 that have been mixing in with the first team. Claypool more so than Shavers to begin training camp, but after yesterday, that injury to Claypool, and maybe even before that injury, I'm not quite sure if the mix started before that. But once Claypool went down, Shavers immediately mixed in, and he was out there once again right at the start of team drills, mixing in with that first team. So certainly a good sign if you're a Tyrell Shavers supporter making the roster, participating with that first team and catching balls from Josh Allen. He made a great catch today, extending to make it near the sideline. So Shavers really putting his best foot forward here when given the opportunity.
Today, the pads went on, so obviously the trenches, a little bit more of a focus. Going into training camp, the top 5 along the offensive line from left to right, Deion Dawkins, David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, and Spencer Brown seemed pretty set in stone. The one player who we thought maybe could possibly get challenged is David Edwards. Has there really been anyone of these depth linemen that have given David Edwards a run for his money at left guard, or do these top 5 look pretty cemented in place?
Yeah, it's been that top 5 throughout training camp. I don't think there has been any rotation with that unit. I think that's the only position group that hasn't rotated throughout training camp. It's just been those 5 with the first team. Now, the second team has been a little bit of rotation positionally. You have Lale Collins moving inside and outside. You got Will Clapp at center. I think he's moved elsewhere as well. But with that first team, it's been that top 5 locked in And I've been impressed what I've seen from David Edwards, just a big human being, a starting experience with a Super Bowl team with the Rams. I think he's put on a pretty good show thus far to begin training camp. One item of concern along the offensive line, I know there was talk about Cedric Van Pran Granger perhaps challenging for the starting center spot. By no means do I think that's a possibility. Van Pran Granger has really been working with the third team more so than the second team throughout training camp. But Connor McGovern's snaps have been iffy throughout training camp. And really, it was brought to my attention yesterday when Joe Marino of Locked On Bill showed up at training camp for the first day. And I asked him just kind of basic takeaways after the first 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so. And one of them was, he thought McGovern's snaps were coming in low pretty regularly. And then sure enough, about 2 snaps later, McGovern rolled one back to Allen. So I don't think there's any concern in terms of McGovern's ability to protect Allen and work in the running game and make the calls quite yet, although we haven't seen him do a lot of that. But I think it's starting to become a story with his snaps. If he continues to roll these snaps and continues to bring them in low to Josh Allen, that's going to be cause for concern because offense, as Joe said on our podcast yesterday, it's all about timing. And if you're disrupting that timing with a bad snap, it's going to lead to some negative consequences.
If the Bills ultimately have to make that decision to move on from McGovern and kick him back to left guard, I'm assuming they're going to take all their sweet time and let them get accustomed to one another. And it would honestly be a dire emergency if they had to make that switch. But who do you think would get the first crack? Because I've seen Alec Anderson taking snaps at center. I've seen Will Clapp taking snaps at center. And I've seen Cedric Van Pran Granger taking snaps at center. Who do you think is going to be Connor McGovern's main backup? And who would be the next in line if they have to make that tough decision?
At this point, it seems like Will Clapp during training camp. But then again, once roster cut down day comes, who knows if Clapp's even on the roster. I think with Van Pran Granger being a draft pick has much better chance to stick around. But in terms of that offensive line rotation, I haven't paid as close attention to it as I would have liked, but I believe I've seen Clapp work in more with the second team in there than Van Pran Granger. He did sustain a minor elbow injury during one-on-ones yesterday, but he returned to practice today and seemed like he was okay. So I think if you ask me in the long run, it's going to be Cedric Van Pran Granger, but in the immediate, I think it's been Will Clapp during training camp.
Shifting focus a bit now to the opposite side of the ball, but staying with the trenches, the edge rusher position is also one that's been talked about quite a bit this offseason. Obviously, you had 3 different scenarios play out. You had Von Miller's kind of contract getting restructured. You had AJ Epinesa coming back, re-signing with the team. Gregory Rousseau, the team picking up his 5th-year option. It certainly looks like Dwayne Smoot has an inside track to make the team as well. And you heard Ed Oliver sort of heaping his praise on Dwayne Smoot as well in his little mini conference today. Who has the inside track for a potential 5th spot at the edge? I mean, I would have to think Javon Solomon, being the draft pick, maybe is that guy. What has he looked like? Is anyone else stood out for the Bills at edge? And we know last year they did keep 5 edge players. Does it look like Solomon maybe has the inside track there? I would hope so, given he's a draft pick, or any of the other guys like Tuhill or Kingsley Jonathan pushing Javon Solomon.
Yeah, I think Kingsley Jonathan may be the best chance along with Javon Solomon. Jonathan made the team. Kingsley Jonathan, that is, made the team last season out of training camp, and he did have a sack today during a nice day for the pass rush. He's really shown some ability periodically throughout training camp. Javon Solomon also had a good rep during one-on-ones, won that rep, was able to get some penetration into the backfield. The problem with Solomon is his size and his inability, I think, to defend the run thus far during training camp. The pads did just come on today, so still plenty to prove in that regard. But in terms of a two-way defender, rushing the passer, defending the run, I think there's a long way to go for Solomon, and I think they'd probably be more comfortable with Kingsley Jonathan there. But knowing the draft pick that they spent on Solomon and knowing the great ability rushing the passer he showed during his collegiate years, I think the upside is there for Solomon. And if they're able to get him on this roster and put him in a pass rushing specialist role, I think that'll be a role that he's best suited to fill this season. But yeah, I think it's between Kingsley Jonathan and Javon Solomon. Haven't seen much from Casey Toohill. I like his size and athleticism, but like I said, just has yet to pop for me, at least during training camp.
Is Dwayne Smoot as Ed Oliver is advertising in practice? I mean, he got a lot of praise during that conference today. He said he was a star. Like, is he showing out in practice, Dwayne Smoot?
Yeah, absolutely. He's had a couple of sacks already. And he's also kicking inside, playing a bit of defensive tackle. And we all know how Sean McDermott and his defensive staff love them some versatility up front. I think to begin training camp, if you would have asked me, Smoot was kind of one of my last guys I kept on my 53-man roster projection. But quickly during training camp, he's grown on me in the way that his coaches and teammates talk about him. Bobby Babich said it the other day. He plays with an old school edge, and you see that materialize each day on the practice field. Really a gritty player, a player that makes the most of his ability. And he's got that track record of 5-6 sacks per season with the Jaguars, I think 4 or 5 years in a row. So if he can give you that as a pass rusher rotation for the Bills, I think they'd be overjoyed.
Again, some unfortunate injury news for the Buffalo Bills. Mike Edwards, it was announced today, he's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks, probably, likely with a hamstring injury. Those usually take some time, and then there's always the issue of re-injuring an injury like that. He's already missed all of spring with a shoulder injury as well. That leaves DeMar Hamlin and Cole Bishop competing opposite Taylor Rapp, who seemingly entrenched himself at one of those safety spots. Who's the leader in the clubhouse right now to start opposite Rapp? Is it DeMar Hamlin? Is it Cole Bishop? Are we going to have to get into a Terrell Bernard situation like last year where we just hope that Mike Edwards can be ready to come in cold week 1 and starts? Or possibly could the Buffalo Bills have to make a call to the bullpen and call up Micah Hyde to see if he can return to the Buffalo Bills? What are they going to do at that spot opposite of Taylor Rapp?
Yeah, the funny thing is, I'm sorry, not the funny thing, but maybe coincidental thing is both Mike Edwards on the Bills roster are currently injured. The offensive line version dealing with a concussion, and the safety version dealing with a hamstring injury after that shoulder injury during OTAs. And at this point, it's DeMar Hamlin, leader in the clubhouse, to fill that second safety role. He really came on strong during the offseason training program, and I think the Bills rewarded him by putting him out there with the first team to start training camp. And maybe the plan was to work their way back to Mike Edwards. But now that he's week to week with that hamstring injury, and you saw him, video that I retweeted, Thad Brown posted it, he's really walking with a heavy limp, seemingly not being able to flex that leg fully. And he had some electro pulsating device on there, I think, to help loosen it up. So certainly a concern there in terms of how quickly he'll be able to return this preseason, if at all. Maybe he waits all the way until the regular season. We all know how those tissue injuries can last, that hamstring can really be a nagging injury. So certainly not the start Mike Edwards wanted with the Bills, but hey, the door has swung wide open for DeMar Hamlin and now Cole Bishop, who is with the ones out there today. His second opportunity with the ones. It was supposed to be Edwards if the rotation held true, but instead Bishop got that opportunity, and he's flashed at times. Really hasn't made a huge impact, but he did have a sack or a would-be sack off the edge on I believe it was Sunday or Friday, and he's looked adequate out there. I think he's still learning the playbook, still learning his responsibilities, but look for Cole Bishop to make a push for the starting job before the season is through.
You had a chance to sit down with DeMar Hamlin and have a conversation with him.
Oh,
sorry. I cut out a little bit there. My apologies.
I froze earlier too. I thought it was me for a second.
You had a chance to sit down with DeMar Hamlin. He had a big spring. And this is going to sound superficial because it is a little bit, right? He picked off Tom Brady at the white party for Fanatics. He had a game-winning shot in a charity basketball game. It just seems like DeMar Hamlin, 2 years removed from that awful injury, he's getting his swagger back. Is that something that you noticed from DeMar Hamlin?
No doubt. In my conversation with him, and I made this joke earlier, I actually didn't sit down with DeMar Hamlin. I stood up with him, and much to my dismay, my 5'8" frame standing next to these NFL players, and never works out in my favor. But that's why I stand behind the camera in those circumstances. But during my conversation with him, certainly saw that swagger. Not only I asked him about Brandon Beane talking about how hungry he was to return to form, and he went above and beyond. He said he wasn't just hungry, he was expletives starving to return to form. So I think DeMar Hamlin not only has gotten his swagger back, he's really building that confidence that he had before he went out during that scary situation in Cincinnati. Remember, this was a guy who had 90 tackles on this defense, filling in for Micah Hyde when he went down a few years ago. A lot of experience in this defense. He comes back like you said, just budding with confidence, and I think this could be a big season for him.
Before we let you go, Alex, got to talk a little bit about special teams because it seems to be somewhat of an area of concern for this Bills team. Maybe a team that doesn't have a lot of areas of concern going into the season, but Tyler Bass kind of limped into the offseason a bit, figuratively, right? Not injury related, and now the Bills have this punter competition apparently with Sam Martin, Jack Browning. Holding is an element of this. How Tyler Bass seems like maybe he's a bit of a head case battling some demons here. On the special teams front, is there a legitimate chance for Browning to take that punter spot from Sam Martin? Has there been a noticeable difference between these guys and holding for Tyler Bass? And how has Tyler Bass looked early on in camp?
We've only seen Tyler Bass kick once during training camp. We've seen him kick 3 times throughout the entire offseason. The first opportunity was a great day with Jack Browning holding. I believe he went 7 for 7. The next day during the offseason training program, a bad day for Bass with Sam Martin holding. I believe he went 3 for 8. And the only time we've seen him during training camp, another good day, and this time with Sam Martin holding. I think it was 5 for 5 between 28 yards and 49 yards. So Bass has been up and down in limited opportunities in front of the media this spring and summer. It's going to be a big season for Bass. They gave him that contract a couple of years ago, and the big miss in that Chiefs game. And listening to Matt Beauvais in Sales podcast tonight at Barbell in Rochester, I think it was Beauvais who brought up a great point. It was really Bass who lost them that game against the Eagles during the regular season. He missed a couple field goals during that game, and then you saw Jake Elliott come out in the rain and boot a 60-yarder through the uprights. So that's what they paid Bass to be, and a kicker that can do what Elliott did in that situation. And too often last year, Bass came up small. So he is in major need of a rebound season this year, and he's been up and down throughout the offseason. I think we'll see more and more as time goes. But, yeah, I think that punter competition is a real thing. They're keeping Browning around. We haven't seen a whole lot of punting either, but we'll see how that plays out.
The Buffalo Bills lost a ton of leadership this offseason. Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Trey White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Mitch Morse. You can even throw guys like Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips in there. Who has stepped up thus far in training camp that you've seen that has sort of filled that leadership void for the Buffalo Bills?
I've seen Josh Allen first and foremost. I think he has just changed his demeanor out there. Also on the offensive side of the ball, Mac Hollins, his teammates already speaking glowingly of him, and he's only been here for a couple months. On the defensive side of the ball, Taron Johnson really taking a hold of this secondary. You've seen him work with several young players before, during, and after practice. I tweeted out a video of it not too long ago. But really, I think a lot of the leadership and the change in voice this season is coming from the coordinators. You hear Joe Brady, you hear Bobby Babich. Every time there's two, for those of you who haven't been at training camp, there's 2 fields primarily that the Bills utilize. There's a field over here and there's a field over here. And to begin practice, they usually do some special teams. So the reserves are on the bigger field while Bobby Babich and let's say the more high-profile defensive players are on the other field. And Babich is over there with them waiting for special teams to wrap up and the entire defense to come together. And in the last, 2 minutes of that sequence there, as he's waiting, you could just see him growing restless. He starts pacing. He starts talking to himself. He is just amped up. And these players are just living off that energy. And you see it from Brady as well. Maybe not as boisterous as Brady, but just the raw confidence that both of these guys show, I think, is bleeding over to the players on the field. You had a different dynamic with Leslie Frazier and Ken Dorsey. I think more of tepid personalities, but these two guys are in your face, younger, more energy, more exuberance, and I think it's really serving the Bills well. You have some leadership coming from the players, but a lot of the leadership is stemming from those two coordinators, and I think it's a great thing.
Speaking of leadership from the players, as we start to talk maybe about some of these vets that are now back and have been with the system for a while, you've got Matt Milano coming back from injury. You've got Von Miller, another year removed from his injury. And you got Daquan Jones, who did come back at the end of last year. Bills gave him the contract in the offseason. 3 key veteran pieces on this defense. I know you have that friendly banter with the thigh doctor there about Matt Milano. So what's the scoop on these guys in practice, right? Are they looking maybe not so much Daquan Jones, who as we did see him come back at the end of last season, but Milano and Miller specifically, how have these guys looked? Because obviously the Bills are hoping to get some kind of juice out of that contract from Von Miller still. And obviously Milano paired with Bernard could be potentially an all-pro tandem at linebacker. So I think a lot of Bills fans want to see Milano back to form. They want to see Von Miller contribute in a meaningful way through sacks. So how have those guys looked so far in practice?
Yeah, I actually saw a thigh doctor at practice on Sunday, and I think we determined my thighs are much stronger. I think that battle was won on Sunday. But yeah, as far as Matt Milano, I think that video I posted that gained a lot of traction. I said that he was showing no lingering effects. Maybe not the right phrase to use, because if you slow that video down, clearly you can see maybe a little bit of a hitch or a sloppy transition from when he's pushing off that ailing leg or recovering leg, I guess I should say. But what I meant by that is really not showing any lingering effects in terms of he's out there participating in everything. He's running at full speed. He's pursuing the ball well. He's caught up to some backs out of the backfield that I'm not sure every linebacker in the league can make the plays that he has during training camp. You're seeing that sideline to sideline ability start to crop itself back up again. So I don't think he's back to his full efficacy, but when I said no lingering effects, I truly meant that you're not seeing him held back in any sense. Now, we didn't see him out there today for the first day of padded practice, and I think that was always in the plans, kind of slowly ramping him up in terms of the contact, something he hasn't seen in quite some time. And also on the first day of pads, tempers, as we saw today, are usually running high, and guys are waiting to hit somebody else, and maybe holding a veteran player like he and Von Miller, who were also held out along with Taron Johnson today, maybe holding those players back who are all critical to your team. Maybe that's the smart play in the long run, so you can keep them healthy. But from what I've seen from Milano, I like what I've seen. I think he's progressing well, and I think come week 2, 3, 4, I think you could see Matt Milano fully back to Matt Milano. Now, Von Miller, haven't seen a lot from him. He, I think, had a couple of would-be sacks earlier in the week. Like I said, he was off today. I've sensed kind of a demeanor change in Von Miller. He was really out there the past couple of years, really vocal and energetic throughout practice. And not to say that he's not out there providing the energy, but I think he's taken a step back and really just trying to reclaim himself and his own role in really locking in that focus at this point of the preseason.
The Buffalo Bills offense, ton of rave reviews throughout camp. Josh Allen, people are raving about him, how comfortable he looks, his leadership. People are raving about the motion that Joe Brady has instilled in this offense. Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid, all getting a lot of love. Who are some maybe other guys outside of the ones that I just mentioned who are standing out? I'm not hearing a lot of James Cook. I'm not hearing a lot of Khalil Shakir. How are those guys looking thus far?
Yeah, I said it earlier today. Shakir has had a quiet camp. He's been consistently productive, but no explosive plays. And I don't think Shakir is that type of player that you're going to see flash in training camp the way that you could see a Keon Coleman or a Curtis Samuel or perhaps even a KJ Hamler, just that raw athleticism, and with Coleman, that great size and contested catch ability. I think Shakir's strength is just in his consistency and just how he's a rock of this receiving core. And you've seen him catch a number of passes, but like I said, none of the highlight reel variety. And maybe that's why he's had kind of a quiet camp. Another player I think that stood out, and you saw him posted by the Bills social media team, a great throw and catch from Allen to him yesterday. Dawson Knox is having himself a strong training camp. And we all have heard the talk about the 12 personnel usage that the Bills plan to use again this year, with Dalton Kincaid at the head of the spear in that regard. But don't count out Dawson Knox, six touchdowns just a couple of years ago, and working in those two tight end sets. And with such transition at the wide receiver position, I think he's going to take on an increased role this season. Obviously, he was limited last year with the injury, but now fully healthy, I think he's going to be a big part. Maybe not a big part, but I think he's going to be a contributing part to this offense.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, sorry, Dave, you can go.
I was going to say, I like the comment on Knox, right? Because you have a lot of new faces in the room, but Knox has been there for a couple of years. You have Knox, Shakir, and now Kincaid really in his second year is going to be a veteran of the personnel room, right? I mean, but Knox has been there longer than anybody at this point as far as the skill position players. So yeah, I'm looking forward to him contributing in a meaningful way this year, and I think Josh Allen trusts him. So I like that. I like that comment right there. Go ahead, Steve. No, we lost him.
I think he froze again.
He froze again. Well, so I want to ask you kind of the same question then, Alex, on the defensive side of the ball around guys that are standing out. We talked a little bit about the safeties earlier. How about some of these rookies too? You talked a little bit about Solomon, but what about Dwayne Carter? What about Olafosio? Like, how are some of these rookies looking? And then is there anyone in the veteran group maybe that's, disappointing a little bit or not sort of bringing their best foot forward at this point? A lot of chatter on the offense, rightfully so. That's what people want to hear about. But, the defense and Bobby Babich is going to be a new look group as well. So curious to hear your thoughts on who's been putting their best foot forward on the defensive side.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk with Dwayne Carter today after practice, and he got into a little scrap with Alec Anderson on Sunday. Really not backing down in that circumstance. It was a sequence of 3 reps. Carter went offside, and then he got beat by Anderson, and the coaches wanted both of them to go at it again, and Carter lined back up. He did get beat again, but got into Anderson after the play, just kind of showing him he wasn't going to back down, and I thought that was impressive from the rookie, showing a little bit of spunk. And got back out there today, first day in pads, and just asked him if there was anything that surprised him about professional training camp, and said no, just maybe some more physicality here and there, and maybe some stuff like that. But I've been impressed with Dwayne Carter. Some veterans that haven't stood out to me: Deshaun Williams and Austin Johnson on the interior. Bills need to improve their depth at the defensive tackle position. Haven't heard a lot from them, albeit the pads did just come on, so maybe we see more from those guys as training camp progresses.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Alex. We don't want to take up too much more of your time, but plug your work, plug your socials. Where can people find you? Where can people find the content that you create as a Buffalo Bills beat reporter?
Yeah, you can find me at Alex Brasky on all social media channels. You can find my work at thedailynewsonline.com. That's for the Batavia Daily News. Also, Bills Digest. We had our pre-training camp issue. We'll also have a pre-season issue coming out before the regular season, late August, early September. So be on the lookout for that. And the Right Here, Right Now live Buffalo Football Talk podcast with AJ Sobolski. We've been pumping out takeaways each day after camp, usually around 1:30, 2 o'clock, somewhere in that range. So check out my social media, and you can find that. Quick updates after practice. We try to get them out as quick as we possibly can for the people.
Thank you so much, Alex, and we appreciate it. And we will see you next Monday, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern. You are an invaluable resource. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thanks,
You
Alex.
got it. Thanks for having me.
That was Alex Brasky, Buffalo Bills beat reporter. That was a lot of fun having a conversation, a lot of new insight that we've sort of gleaned here over the past half an hour. So thank you to Alex. We're going to keep going for a little bit, and we're just going to react to some of the things that Alex talked about. And I want to start with the running back position because we talked about Josh Allen already, how he's sort of looking comfortable, how he's looking confident. How about the running backs as pass catchers? That seems to be a new wrinkle that Joe Brady is really emphasizing, whether it's James Cook out of the backfield, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, even Curtis Samuel getting a ton of run and running a multitude of routes, all four of those guys. You should probably really buy Buffalo Bills running backs if you are in a PPR type of league for fantasy, because it appears like they are going to be heavily involved in the passing game this year.
Yeah, and Eric and Anthony said after day 4 of camp that Ray Davis really impressed them as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And I think, look, James Cook was a stud last year. Don't get me wrong. There were a couple drops issues we had from him. By and large, he was fantastic, but there was that video too that was circulating. I forgot which day it was from where the ball hit him in the face. Now, I know Dalton Kincaid was kind of messing with him a little bit, so can't really blame him too much for that. But yeah, I think, look, James Cook, when he's on and he's got soft hands and he's kind of come into the league with that reputation, just clean up a little bit of those drops. And Ray Davis has been getting glowing reviews as a pass catcher. I think the Curtis Samuel piece is also interesting because I think Joe Brady's got a lot of opportunity to deploy Curtis Samuel in different situations out of the backfield as a receiver, inside and out, by the way, as a receiver as well. So Curtis Samuel does, I mean, we use this phrase a lot, but he is a chess piece for this offense. But I think even more than that, it's like, as a receiver out of the backfield, you could see Curtis Samuel do some of that as well. So I'm excited about that. I think we talk about this a lot. We know the Bills haven't been a big screen team in years past, and we also know that when they have tried it in years past, it hasn't really worked out that great. They've done okay on wide receiver screens and tight end screens, but not so much with the running backs. So it'll be interesting to see if that becomes more of a focal point, and also if Joe Brady wants to use the running backs as sort of these, I want to call them layup type throws, but as a way to get Josh in rhythm. We hear about him getting outside the pocket a lot. Easy throws rolling outside of the pocket to your running back in the flat. Like, these are types of things that I think would make Bills fans feel really good, getting some of these easy layups for Josh. And we'll see how that kind of continues to play out.
It just seems like there's really a plan for Curtis Samuel and a way to get him the ball in a multitude of ways. And Pops Mafia comes in and says Samuel in motion a lot. It's almost like, and again, I hate to throw this player out there because I think Curtis Samuel is a significantly better player, but what we always wanted the Buffalo Bills to do with Isaiah McKenzie, like just get the guy moving east-west pre-snap. And it seems like the Buffalo Bills are doing that now with Curtis Samuel. And that allows Josh Allen to see what kind of coverage the defense is in. And there are a number of situations where the coverage dictates just dumping it off to Curtis Samuel and letting him make a play. I really would not be shocked if Curtis Samuel ends up being the all-purpose yards leader on this football team when all is said and done, which kind of shocks me because I honestly would have predicted Dalton Kincaid previous to training camp.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still leaning that way because I just, I think part of this too is like Joe Brady experimenting maybe a little bit. And I think he has like a really good idea based on sort of how things materialized at the end of last year and really how big of a contributor Dalton Kincaid was all last year. I think, I'm not saying he's putting him to the side, but I think he's like pretty comfortable already with what he knows he can do with Dalton Kincaid or what he thinks he's going to do with him. So it could be a little experimenting, but it wouldn't surprise me if those two were the top two, and they should be, right? You have Dalton Kincaid, first-round tight end, who was a rookie last year, had an amazing rookie season, and you have really your premier free agent signing in Curtis Samuel from this offseason. Everyone wants to talk about Keon Coleman, rightfully so, but I don't think I would be surprised if Keon Coleman, led the team in targets or was even second. I think he'll be maybe third, but Samuel and Kincaid, I think at this point seem to be the two top options.
AK Cash comes in and says, I think Brady really likes using the leaks out as layups when the first and second reads aren't there. And that's the next progression of Josh Allen, right? Being willing to take those layups. Eric has done a great job in years past. Like Ken Dorsey provided Josh with layups, right? But they weren't layups that Josh Allen was willing to take. So maybe he has matured, or Joe Brady has created a system where Josh Allen is just simply more comfortable in taking those sort of layups. And that's the next phase of Josh Allen, because we saw that Warren Sharp statistic of players who have thrown like 10 plus yard touchdowns or 20 plus yard touchdowns. Josh Allen's over here, and the next guy is like down here, right? If Josh Allen can add death to 1,000 paper cuts to his game to go along with his downfield stuff, to go along with his running, to go along with the plays that he makes, when things break down, that's just another pitch that he will have in his repertoire, and it'll make him even more dangerous, to the point where it's going to be like, there's no stopping this dude. It's already difficult enough now. You give him that Tom Brady mode, like, look out.
And we've seen him do it at times, right? It just hasn't been like week to week that he's done that. And obviously there's a lot of variables and nuances that go into kind of how things play out each week. But the times where he's been efficient and has taken that approach of the death by 1,000 paper cuts have been some of his best games statistically and analytically, right? So it's like, obviously the Bills need to improve on the deep ball this year. That was like pretty much non-existent from their offense last year, but it could be a little bit of give and take here, right? Like you need to loosen up the defense a little bit. And I think that, look, give me layups, because at times things felt difficult last year and it felt like, Josh had to bail the team out a bunch of times. Let's make life easier on him, right? As easy as we can. And it certainly seems like, everyone's got the good vibes right now through, about a week's worth of practices. Let's see if that continues here going into the second week.
Yeah. The approach this year looks like it's going to be wide receiver by committee. And it just looks like all the pieces fit so well, from Samuel, who we just mentioned, to Khalil Shakir, to Mac Hollins, to Dalton Kincaid, to Dawson Knox. The vibes are good right now with the Buffalo Bills offense. And it looks like all of these guys are buying in to the committee approach. The one name I haven't mentioned is Keon Coleman. And I'll tell you what, like, I don't want to get too excited by what we're seeing in shorts, by what we're seeing just in one day of pads. But I'll tell you what, he's exceeded my expectations. And I was excited to see Keon Coleman play. I thought it might take him a year to get acclimated to the league. I think the Keon Coleman emergence maybe will come sooner than you and I have sort of imagined.
I think it's really easy to get excited by the start of his camp, right? I think that there will inevitably be a day or two where things maybe go the other way for him. Like it's just the reality of a rookie, or really anybody, right? In training camp, you're going to have good days and bad. I think he's got the mental makeup, the way he approaches the game, that he's not going to let sort of hurdles get in his way. I think he's going to, really continue to endear himself to the fans and to the coaching staff as he kind of, starts this now second part of this journey, as we put the pads on today, and, a little bit of a mixed bag today from the reports we heard. But look, I think the Bills had a huge void with Stephon Diggs leaving. They drafted him in the first pick in the second round, and there's an expectation that he's going to be I'll call it key contributor to the offense as a rookie. Does that mean he's going to be the leading pass catcher or leading target receiver? No, but if he's the third guy in the line, that's a nice spot for him to be, and maybe even fourth, because there's less pressure on him that way. If you have guys like Samuel and Kincaid, and you can put Coleman out there maybe to start his career in positions where Joe Brady can say, look, you did really well at A, B, and C in camp. That's how we're going to use you to start the season, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I do expect him to be a key contributor this year, but I also don't think that he's going to be like an 80 catch 1,000-yard guy as a rookie. So, I mean, I'm not trying to, piss on in anyone's Cheerios here, but I'm just saying, like, it's a good start, and I hope it continues.
The offensive line, we sort of talked with Alex, despite Connor McGovern's struggles a little bit snapping, which the Buffalo Bills are probably hoping the kinks get worked out over the next 6 weeks, it appears that the top 5 guys are set. So let's talk about the depth competition a little bit, because I think that a name that I look at, 2 names that I look at as guys who I think have really, again, it's early. The pads just went on. We haven't seen preseason yet, but I think 2 guys who built off of what they did last year and I think are going to be stalwarts as depth pieces this year. Ryan Vandemark, who the Buffalo Bills have made a conscious decision to make sure he's working on the right and left side because he will be the swing tackle. And Alec Anderson, who's gotten reps at guard and center. I think those guys are going to take a step up this year. Obviously, Ryan Vandemark was the swing tackle, so hopefully he's just a little bit more secure in that position this year. But I think Alec Anderson moves up into that Ryan Bates role where he is the top interior offensive lineman backup. Those 2 guys really stand out to me the most when looking at the interior offensive line depth. Or just the offensive line depth in general, excuse me.
100% agree. You hear about, Grable struggling a little bit. You hear about SVGP kind of being in that third rotation in. And look, I had Anderson and I had both Anderson and Vandemark as roster locks, right? Like stone cold locks to make the team. And I think they are the 6th and 7th guys. Vandemark easily the swing tackle. Maybe Lyle Collins is kept to be like an emergency type of situation. We'll see. But I also liked what I heard Alex say about, the way Alec Anderson approached those reps with Dwayne Carter, right? We were talking about Dwayne Carter at that time and how he fought back, but Alec Anderson won those reps. And so, like, shouldn't be a surprise. He's a vet. Dwayne Carter is a touted rookie, right? And Alec Anderson has been sort of a game day inactive type of player for the Bills. So it's nice to see him kind of saying, hey, look, I'm here to contribute to this team. And yeah, I'm with you on that.
And it's going to be really interesting to see where they go from there, because we got 7 guys now. We got the top 5. We got Vandemark. We have Anderson. That leaves probably 1 more active game day spot. And that leaves maybe 1 game day inactive spot. And if the Bills are really feeling frisky, they'll go 10 offensive linemen, because Pops Mafia comes in and says, hey, Vandemark has looked a lot better on the left side. And if that's the case and the Buffalo Bills don't feel comfortable with Ryan Vandemark on the right side, unless it's in a pinch to close out a game, Lyle Collins has his spot locked in as sort of that veteran right tackle. But I've heard reports that say Lyle Collins looking a little bit clunky. I know Joe Marino is really honing in on Lyle Collins. He wasn't too impressed. SVPG as a 5th round pick that we saw on Bills Embedded, the Bills were considering taking in the 4th round. The Bills are probably not going to want to risk him to the waiver wire. Will Clapp. That's an interior offensive line vet. And if Connor McGovern is struggling with snapping, you're probably not going to want to cut Will Clapp. So you got your 7, then you got Will Clapp, SVPG, and Lyle Collins. There's a real chance, maybe possibly, the Buffalo Bills keep 10 offensive linemen going into the season.
Certainly is. And I wouldn't rule it out at all. I think Jessica asked that question as well in the chat. And I think the good thing is there's time, multiple weeks still for SVGP to kind of improve. He's a rookie and sort of kind of work his way up. And maybe all things equal, if he's at level pegging with Will Clapp, then maybe Will Clapp does become expendable and Van Pan Granger does kind of cement himself as the backup center. But this goes along kind of with what I said in the pre-camp show is like, I did not expect him to challenge McGovern. I was more concerned about David Edwards. It's positive to hear that he has not been, he's been looking good. And Eric Turner said the same thing actually, but the snaps are a concern for McGovern, right? Like the protection may be fine, but like we know how much the Bills are in shotgun. Like these snaps need to be on, and it'll be interesting if we start to hear about like the snapping from Will Clapp and SVGP compared to McGovern as we go through these next handful of practices.
Jessica Tennis also comes in and says, who will come in when the Bills go heavy? Honestly, with Dawson Knox back and both of these tight ends, unless we're on the goal line and you throw in like a guy like Alec Anderson, I think the Buffalo Bills might do away with sort of that 6 offensive linemen. They really might not need it this year because they're going to want to get those tight ends onto the field in 12 personnel. So I think the Bills, at least, on the regular field of play, will probably go away from that heavy stuff because they'll be leaning on the tight ends that they have. But my guess would be probably Alec Anderson around the goal line. I have some anxiety right now, Dave, and I want you to talk me through this anxiety that I'm having. And I made a social media post about this, and people were telling me to calm down, and they're right. I probably should calm down. We're only, 4 or 5 days into training camp, but I'm having 5th round pick waiver wire anxiety right now because you look at SVPG with the struggles that Connor McGovern is having. Does a guy like Will Clapp get the nod over SVPG and the Buffalo Bills risk Van Pran Granger to the waiver wire? You look at defensive end with Dwayne Smoot stepping up and Kingsley Jonathan continuing to build off of already making the roster last year. Does Javon Solomon get risked to the waiver wire? You look at the linebacker position, Dorian Williams getting in work with the ones. Joe Marino said the best 2 looking depth linebackers today were Deion Jones and Balon Spector, or not Balon Spector, excuse me, Nicholas Morrow. Balon Spector's running with the 2s. Are we going to lose Ulofoshio? Are we going to risk him to the waiver wire? So I'm having 5th round pick anxiety right now, and I'm worried that the Buffalo Bills are going to go with short-term solutions over long-term upside if it really comes down to it, because in reality, the Bills are going to be in win now mode every single year they have Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if you think about each of those things in a vacuum, like, yes, you could see a scenario where a single guy gets cut in a vacuum. Could you see a situation where 3 5th round picks get cut at the same cut down? I just don't see it. Now, maybe one does. I don't necessarily know which one it's going to be. If I'm saying which one is maybe the most expendable, I mean, I don't think SVGP is expendable at this point. I think you got to keep him around. I don't think there's any sort of long-term outlook with Will Clapp. I think the linebacker position is the deepest maybe on the roster outside of quarterback because of Josh Allen. But Ulofoshio is like a perfect match system-wise for what the Bills want to do. And then you got Solomon, who brings a skill set to the table that the Bills really desperately need. And I could see a scenario where the Bills do keep Solomon because they are not worried about Kingsley Jonathan not making it to the practice squad. So I feel like I know I have all 3 of those guys on my 53. I'm still going to put them all 3, and I think it's just too early to make the conclusion yet.
And that's a great point too, right? Because Will Clapp is not subjected to waivers. So maybe you can work out a deal with Will Clapp, and Will Clapp can be sitting on your practice squad. You can call him up when necessary. He can save you SVPG. A guy like Casey Toohill, not going to be risked to waivers. He's a guy, even if you lose Kingsley Jonathan, that you can stash on your practice squad. And at the same point, like if Nicholas Morrow or Deion Jones get cut, is anyone really going to pick those guys up that late in the game? Maybe they can go to the practice squad. So thank you, Dave. You just talked me down. Jessica, you just talked me down. I was having that anxiety. Everyone knows how much I love my draft picks. Pop Mafia says, where does Cameron Klein fit in? I think he's another, candidate for the practice squad, like his special teams versatility. Dano hashtag comes in with a great comment, kind of going back to the offensive stuff we were talking about. He said, Ant thinks they should go tight spread instead of wide. What do you think? That's a great idea. I think the Buffalo Bills have the talent to bunch guys at the line of scrimmage because Matt Collins can go run a route or get after it in the run game. Keon Coleman can go run a route or get after in the run game. Same with our 2 tight ends, Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. So I think that's a great idea. It's not only going to help the passing game and creating mismatches, it's going to help the running game as well. I'm really looking forward to all the various different ways the Buffalo Bills can beat opposing defenses once the regular season hits.
Yeah, I think that bunch, sort of tight formation will work really well with the personnel the Bills have now, especially the size, the 2 tight ends. You got Coleman, obviously, with the size. So, yeah, I'm with that. And Jessica says here, the only 5th rounder you might lose is shorter.
All right. Well, I'm Team Tyrell Shavers, so don't you? Everyone, I think most people watching this show know how upset I was that the Buffalo Bills used a 5th round pick on an athletically freakish player who plays special teams, but was never much of a wide receiver at any point in his career in college. They passed on some pretty good collegiate pass catchers because they like Justin Shorter's gunning ability. And that's, proving to be a problem in training camp when he can't crack first team snaps on offense. Looking at some other things, the defensive tackle rotation has been super interesting. You obviously have Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, but then after them, it's been Austin Johnson and Deshaun Williams. We really haven't seen a lot of Dwayne Carter yet. I think the Buffalo Bills have a lot of expectations for Dwayne Carter. The reports have been positive about Dwayne Carter. A lot of time still to go, but we could be looking at 5 defensive tackles making the team again, because Deshaun Williams right now through 5 practices, Carter has not been able to usurp him, but he's also another guy who you might be able to finagle onto the practice squad as a veteran.
I think 5 defensive tackles is realistic. I mean, they had 5, kept 5 last year. I think, we're a week into practices. I don't think the Bills would have, at this stage, unless it was out of necessity, elevated Carter to those second team reps quite yet. It's a different animal when you're talking about Keon Coleman getting first team reps, right? If he's like the focal draft pick. Dwayne Carter is a focal draft pick. Don't get me wrong. He's a day 2 pick, but you have Williams, who's a vet. You have Austin Johnson, who has played well. And look, I mean, Alex said like those 2 guys haven't necessarily stood out per se, but I guess that maybe they haven't done anything to necessarily like give the coaches a reason yet to give Dwayne Carter second team reps. I fully expect in the next week or so that Dwayne Carter will get some second team reps.
AK Cash coming in with another position battle and possibly to keep an eye on. Quentin Morris had his best day of camp today when the pads came on per reports. He made a number of nice catches, both from Josh Allen and Mitch Trubisky and Shane Buechele. But Zach Davidson, we talked about Trey McKitty on the show. We never really talked about Zach Davidson, who was a late round pick of the Minnesota Vikings a couple of years ago from a small school. Huge athletic upside, kind of a Tyler Eifert type of build. Let's throw back to that old Notre Dame tight end. And but he's been hurt. He's been dealing with injuries, but he appears to be healthy now and maybe putting his name in the competition at tight end. So Quentin Morris, the Buffalo Bills can get out from all of his salary. Nothing is guaranteed. His roster spot is not guaranteed at this point.
It's not, but I think there's still a trust element there between Quentin Morris and Josh Allen. And I think Quentin Morris in spots has shown that he's capable of producing it in limited action. So, like you mentioned, the Bills are in win now mode. Is that a position? Yes, the top 2 are studs, right? In Knox and Kincaid, but do the Bills want to, have a security blanket per se as that third guy in Quentin Morris? I think he's still probably the leader in the clubhouse.
Linebacker shuffle has been interesting. Obviously, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard are the ones. When Milano has been given a rest, Dorian Williams has worked in with the ones. The biggest report on Dorian Williams I've seen was from Joe Marino, who said the athleticism is evident. The ability to stop the run is evidence, but he still is struggling when it comes to dropping back into coverage and getting lost, etc. So Dorian Williams is still working through some things. So it's likely the Buffalo Bills are going to want to keep some semblance of a veteran. Most reports have Balon Spector as the second team middle linebacker for now. Obviously, the Bills have always loved his upside. He's currently staying on the field, something he has been unable to do over the course of his career. And then you have Nicholas Morrow. You have Ulo, the rookie 5th round pick, Ulofoshio. You have Deion Jones. Both of Jones and Morrow have looked good per reports. Veteran guys, you'd expect that. And you got obviously Joe Andreessen as well, the UB product, and Shane Simon, the Pitt product. But how do you think this linebacker shuffle has looked? Anything surprised you so far with this linebacker competition?
I don't think anything's like a huge surprise. Like, right, maybe Spector getting run with the 2s off the bat is a little bit of a surprise. But also we know that, athletically he is, really top notch. And when he's healthy, he has proven, that he can flash a bit. And the Bills know that he can play special teams as well. So there's value in that. There's no Tyler Matakevich anymore, right? The Bills love having that special teaming linebacker on the roster. So maybe one of the last roster spots does come down to Balon Spector versus, one of these other vets or even the rookie Ulofoshio. But I wouldn't say anything's a huge surprise. I think this is a really nice group. Like we've said a lot on this show. And so I think also the fact that what happened to the Bills last year in the playoffs and down the stretch with the injuries to the linebackers, like there's no harm in getting guys like Spector second team reps right now. Some of the veterans like Morrow and Deion Jones, like you probably don't worry too much about those guys needing the reps maybe as much as a guy like Spector does. So I'm kind of reading it that way for now.
Looking at the secondary, look who's making a push, getting first team reps, both for Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford. That is Kyer Elam. He is making a push. I think right now, based on what they did last season, it'd be very hard for Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas to lose their jobs. But it's really encouraging to see Kyer Elam, them purposely working him in with the ones, everyone reporting that he's having a good training camp. At some point this season, Rasul Douglas or Christian Benford is going to go down. Kyrie Elam's going to have to probably step in to the starting lineup, just like Dane Jackson has in years past, just like Levi Wallace has had to in years past, Josh Norman, you name it. The guys who have had to step in over the years in the secondary. Kyrie Elam could be making a push to be a valuable depth piece, and he could be cementing himself into the starting cornerback competition in 2025.
Yeah, and we said this going into camp, right? It was a trajectory, based camp potentially for Kyer Elam, either up or down, right? Depending on the performance. Like the Bills are going to need him this year, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I think like that is a given. Like they need him to play well. And the question, like I said on the pre-camp show, was like, what does this mean for him in 2025, right? And I think if he can really show well in camp this year, eliminate some of the variants we talked about on the pre-camp show and kind of just be steady, the Bills, coaching staff increase their trust in him, right? And Kyer Elam begins to trust himself more as well as he puts good reps together, then this could be a really nice story for the Bills, and one that they, I'm sure, really want to happen, right?
Yeah.
Considering the way that first round of that draft played out. So I'm rooting for him. By all accounts, the dude is an amazing guy. I mean, Pops has talked about that as well, and through his brief chats with him. And so I'm rooting really hard for him, and the Bills are going to really need him this year.
Development is not linear. It really looks like this new coaching staff, guys like Jamil Adai coming in, have really helped sort of transform Kyer Elam's game. But, him taking so long to develop, that does come with some of its issues as well, because let's say we get into a situation where he actually gets onto the field this year because of an injury and he plays well, right? He goes in, he has to spot start for 6 games. He looks good in those 6 games. Rasul Douglas's contract comes up this offseason. We don't extend him. Kyer Elam goes into training camp next year competing to be a starter opposite Benford. That's great. Like, that's what we want. But you also have the situation of his 5th-year contract extension. Do you want to pick up his 5th-year option? You're probably not going to want to pick up his 5th-year option, and then he's going to hit free agency the year after. So that's the one part that does stink, because that development took so long, and we're not going to probably get to see Kyer Elam for a full season this year, unless a catastrophic injury happens, which I hope it doesn't, right? It's going to be very hard for the Buffalo Bills to make a decision on that 5th-year option that he will have come up next offseason.
I mean, he could earn it this season potentially, right?
True.
I think the Bills wouldn't. I mean, they did that with Rousseau, right? I mean, they kind of triggered that option in the offseason after a good year, even though he still had the 1 year left. So, look, I think, yeah, he could earn it this year, and I think the Bills would like to see that. I firmly believe that. There's no reporting or anything on that, but I would have to think inside that building they would love to see that and be able to just take that question mark off the table going into 2025.
Another defensive back that has sort of had quietly a pretty good training camp from all reports is another University of Buffalo product. We've seen Cam Lewis, one University of Buffalo product, sort of make his name on this roster as a versatile sort of chess piece in the secondary. Now we have Cam Lewis 2.0 and Jamarcus Ingram, who by all accounts has been doing well on special teams, is doing well as the number 4 boundary corner. And today in practice with Teron Johnson sitting out, you had Cam Lewis as the primary nickel defender, and then Jamarcus Ingram showing some versatility coming in after him as the second team nickel defender. So as the days progress, Jamarcus Ingram's roster spot seems more and more secure.
Yeah, and he was on our 53-man predictions, somewhat out of necessity, but also because he had shown some ability. And I think that if the Bills can feel good about Jamarcus Ingram and he continues to have a steady camp, then the conversation we were having going into 2023, where we had Kyer Elam, Trey White, Dane Jackson, Christian Benford as a really solid 4 boundary guys, not saying it's as good as that projected room was going into the
Mhm.
2023 season, but Douglas, Benford, Elam, and Ingram could end up being better maybe than some people think.
The safety position, right? What are your thoughts right now? Do you trust DeMar Hamlin, Cole Bishop opposite Taylor Rapp? Or do you want to see the Buffalo Bills get aggressive, go and try to coax Micah Hyde off the couch, or maybe even make a phone call to a player like Justin Simmons? Where do you stand right now on what the safety room looks like opposite Taylor Rapp?
I'll say this, and this is a little bit of a nuanced thing for me. I think
Mhm,
if you're saying right now for them to make a move, right now, if they're going to make a move, I would want them to go out and get Justin Simmons. If you're saying later in the season, they need to make a move, then I think at that
mhm.
point it would be Micah Hyde. I don't know that Micah Hyde wants to come back right now, right? Right,
Yeah.
like that's a long season for him. Like I
He'll
think,
come back when we're in Orchard Park. He will
uh,
not come back when we're at St. John Fisher.
yeah. So like that's kind of where I'm thinking, but I'm also kind of like, well, let's see how this plays out, right? We're a
Mhm,
week in. Hamlin's been impressing. We'll see what happens when Edwards comes back from his injury, and Cole Bishop's a rookie,
mhm,
and a lot of people want to see him get reps, right? And he's getting reps, so I don't think it's a bad spot to be in if you're the
mhm,
Bills and the safety group. It was time to turn the page, right, on the duo we had, and, like, it's hard to turn that page. I get it. You wanna
yeah,
kinda hang on a little bit. You wanna hang on a
yeah,
little bit. And so, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Carl here, right? Like, Simmons probably would be too expensive, and
mhm,
Micah Hyde is a break glass in case of emergency come playoff time, I think. So
yeah,
I don't think we're gonna see a move, to be honest, but if they were, the
mhm,
now move, I think, would be Justin Simmons. If you're not gonna do that because he's too expensive or you can't make it work, then the later
mhm.
in the season move would be Hyde.
And a lot of anxiety comes from the unknown. We know this last year. We dealt with it at the middle linebacker position, and we were stressing out because Terrell Bernard was injured. But then Terrell Bernard was able to get healthy. He came in week one, and the rest is history. So I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, as much as maybe anxiety inducing as it is for the fans, whether it's DeMar Hamlin, whether it's throwing Cole Bishop into the fire, whether it's, hey, Mike Edwards, right? You're a veteran. You've been there, done that. Come in cold week one after you've had a chance to rehab. We're just going to insert you right into the starting lineup. I
Mhm.
think that the Buffalo Bills, I think they're going to hold steady. I don't think
I
they're
think
going to
so
make a
too.
move. I
Yeah.
really don't. So yeah, you're with me on that one. Couple more things here. Number one, the return battle and the ramifications on the roster. KJ Hamler right now appears to be in the driver's seat, taking the first team reps at kick and punt return. The interesting name here, I think, is Daquan Hardy, right? Because if Daquan Hardy can come in and Daquan Hardy can usurp KJ Hamler by the time we get through the preseason, then you can free up KJ Hamler's roster spot, carry 5 receivers, and look to bulk up some other positions. So this return battle can have ramifications on all aspects of the roster. I think it might be hard to justify rostering Daquan Hardy if he doesn't the primary return man. And I think if he does become the primary return man, it might be a little bit harder to justify rostering a guy like KJ Hamler. So a lot of jobs legitimately at stake here with this return battle.
Yeah, and I think, like, if Hamler truly separates himself in the return game, and look, I
Mhm.
went on here and said, "Look, this guy hasn't returned a kick or punt in the NFL since 2020, so I didn't
Yeah.
expect much out of him in the return game." But look, the Bills don't have a lot of options, right? So it's
Mhm.
Hamler, it's Isabella, it's Hardy, a little bit of Darrington Evans, right? So it's like the Bills certainly don't want to have to keep Darrington Evans on the roster right now. Maybe they do
Mhm.
now, depending on Ty Johnson's injury, and maybe that becomes an option as well, right? So then maybe it's neither Hardy uh or Hamler, right?
Mhm.
Depending on what happens. But I think you would like to see Hardy do it because then the Bills do have that flexibility with in the wide receiver room. I don't think there's really any risk of losing Hamler to another team. I think if he really shows out well, let's say in the preseason, he makes an impact in the return game, then maybe he can really separate himself from Hardy and he becomes the sixth wide receiver. But that's going to be really hard to take
Yeah.
away a spot from a guy like Tyrell Shavers at
Mhm.
this point. So let the competition play out and see, because I think Hardy, you'd have to think, has an inside track at a roster spot to be the
Mhm.
backup slot. Although, like you mentioned, you saw Cam Lewis playing there. So maybe he doesn't have as much of an inside track to a roster spot as we originally thought, as a 6th round pick, I believe, right? So
last but certainly not least, and this is not on the show notes document. I can't believe I forgot to sort of put this on the show notes document, but there's just so much information that we've have to process over the course of the last 5-6 days at Buffalo Bills training camp. But Ed Oliver and Gregory Rousseau, we had the conversation about Ed Oliver and what adjectives we want to hear: dominating, taking over, making his presence felt in the backfield. We're hearing all of those things with Ed Oliver. And on top of that, the best pass rusher at training camp and one of the highlights of training camp has been Gregory Rousseau. If both of these guys can take their games to an elite, consistent level, the Buffalo Bills defensive line, even if they're lacking the depth they've had in years previous, could be a serious problem.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a serious problem, but I mean, you heard Ed Oliver too today talking on his press conference about Gregory Rousseau and how, like, he was like, look, when he came into the league, he was like 20 years old. And Ed Oliver even said, like, Rousseau progressed faster than Oliver did. So a lot of praise, big years for these two guys ahead, big expectations. I think we did see Ed Oliver pretty much deliver on those expectations last year. I'm going to give Rousseau a bit of a pass because he still played well battling that foot injury pretty much the entire season. So look, I'm excited to see what Gregory Rousseau can do healthy, and, you know, going into a situation where he's going to have hopefully a running mate on the opposite side, and Epinesa that's gonna really, you know, open things up for him. Not to mention Oliver and Oliver and Daquan on the inside. So yeah, big years for both of those guys ahead. And look, I'm kind of good. Like, I'm kind of good with those guys. I'm not like too stressed about the level of play from them. I think they're going to be good this year.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We will be back next Monday doing this same exact thing. We'll be sitting down first half of the show with Alex Brasky, who's got boots on the ground, talking about what he sees at Bills training camp. And then we will react to what Alex has to say and throw in some of our own commentary and your commentary in the back half of the show. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. We will be back next Monday. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!